What does making pasta sauce have to do with great interior design? Hello and welcome to The Drawing Board, a WATG podcast. I'm Monita Rajpal. In this series, we are getting to know the incredible talent at WATG on a whole other level, one that gives you great insight into the minds of those who design, build, create, and dream in ways some of us can only imagine. Rising star is how Damien Follone has been described by magazines and colleagues alike. And as amazing as that is, it can often imply that potential is yet to be reached. For Damien, though, who is senior designer at Wimberley Interiors, that star that is rising is shining so brightly that it isn't about potential, but more about a path that is being lit by creativity and passion. Growing up in Sydney, Damien's love of design was sparked by watching his father build their home. And while that experience showed him the nuts and bolts of what architecture can do, it was his heritage, his family, the pasta-making days that educated him on the importance of the environment in which we live and socialize, and how interior design tells the story of time, place, and connection. Damien joins me from the WATG studio in London. Damien, it is lovely to meet you. I want to start by asking you describe yourself as an interior architect. Tell me a little bit about what it is you do.
At a very high level, I studied architecture. I did a master's in architecture when I lived in Sydney because I'm from Australia originally. And my career, I guess, has sort of evolved since I graduated. And now the work that I'm really kind of passionate and focused on is really more interiors led, particularly restaurants and bars.
In 2020, Space Magazine described you as one of their rising stars. And in the article, you said that holistic hospitality experiences are built on personalities and stories, particularly in the entertainment environment, which is all about energy and human interaction. What is it about creating those kind of spaces and building that interaction that you're drawn to?
It's definitely part of the passion. I'm passionate about design, but then also, as you say, that whole personality and bringing that story in, I think it's probably part of my childhood as well as, a lot of fond memories of growing up and kind of, I like to play on that idea of nostalgia and that comes through to the design, particularly in a restaurant setting when you go into a restaurant and, for example, it's an Italian restaurant, you want to almost be immersed in that whole world. And so that excites me. That's what excites me as much as design does, is really stitching everything together.
We've been so tested over the last few years, and what has become more important is really understanding our emotions and searching for those places and those experiences that really reflect the kind of emotions that we feel we need. What do you think it is or what is it you're seeing that we're all searching for right now, especially in the entertainment space?
In one word, I'd say escapism. Perhaps escapism isn't as prevalent as it was in the last couple of years coming out of the pandemic, but especially here in London, we're really seeing this idea of immersing yourself within a restaurant or an entertainment space and really taking yourself out to another world. I guess there's partly the inability to travel for some people over the last few years and, going somewhere and really feeling like you're in a completely other world.
You mentioned growing up in Sydney and those early memories of family experiences, and especially in an Italian family, just as it is for an Indian family like mine. Gatherings are huge. Food plays such a huge part in who we are and how we feel. Tell me a little bit about your family's annual sauce making day. I was fascinated about this when I read about it.
It's funny when you're growing up and you're having your annual sauce day, you think nothing of it. There's a famous Australian film called Looking for Alibrandi, and it's about a similar sort of character to myself, I guess, an Italian-Australian girl. She was a teenager at the same time I was a teenager. And in the film, there's a gathering where they're making sauce. And I guess that's where the sort of branding of Sauce Day comes from, because it wasn't until I saw that film that I realized, oh, is this unusual? Does not everyone do Sauce Day? Is it an Italian specific thing? And as I've gotten older and I look back on those memories, obviously everyone gathering together, having their certain responsibilities, my grandmother she only really wanted to wash the tomatoes. She didn't want to get her hands too dirty. My dad was always responsible for one part of the process. That is, to me, is really a memory that I hold so dearly, because I think it starts to tell me, like, shape who I am or who I've become and why I'm so excited by the stories around food and the memories and the nostalgia.
I love that. I really love that. It is those early memories that really shape and define what it is we end up searching for in a sense, especially the good stuff, right?
Yeah.
Do you think, or what do you think were the biggest influences in your life when you were a kid?
Now that I look back on it, definitely my parents, my mother and my father. I think they both bring different things to my sort of identity. My dad is now retired, but he was a carpenter and a passionate woodworker when I was a kid. And, there'd be days where he'd bring me into the workshop. That was his way of babysitting me. You just stay there while I'm going to continue doing what I'm doing. But I learned a lot. I watched him doing a lot of different things.
Mm.
We built our family home when I was 10 years old, 9 years old. So my dad was responsible for fitting out a lot of the house and a lot of the carpentry. So that sort of taught me a lot about sort of detailing and
Mm.
obsessive compulsive disorder that maybe I have a little bit of, because he's very particular, and something that my dad builds will last a lifetime.
Mhm.
And then on the other hand, my mum is very much the matriarch and feeding the family. My grandmother was part of that, and my great aunt, and there was a lot of cooking involved and a lot of sort of recipes where not only Italian but Sicilian. So really bringing that part of the identity and making me aware that, there is a real individuality to being Sicilian.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was really kind of what shaped my identity, I think.
There's this idea of, or there's this really real idea of tradition,
Mm,
family connection,
yeah.
right? And then there's also, when you bring that into what it is you do, how do you translate that idea of connection and tradition, perhaps, with modernity and bringing it into a space that pushes it a little bit further, but you still retain that feeling?
I think there's an element of sort of like story sharing and making it relevant to the kind of current experience. So I guess traditions and things like ingredients, perhaps. I think in the world of, it's my passion, it's the world of design and food. So everything I talk about always seems to be in that space. But if you think about processes and ingredients, but then how to really celebrate that in a contemporary way,
Mm.
it could be something like, for example, the idea of making gnocchi when I was a kid, but then translating that in a contemporary way, but more in terms of animation and the visual connection and the storytelling, and pushing that process to be more contemporary or relevant to a location. I think it's stitching these ideas together, and having that interaction that makes it contemporary, I think.
It's a very tactile
Absolutely.
experience, isn't it? So what
Yes.
do you feel are the materials that you were drawn to when you, especially when you're designing a space, and what it is? Obviously, you work with your clients and it's based on what it is they want, but what do you feel are the materials that are really relevant today?
Absolutely natural materials. And perhaps it's my bias, but timber that has texture. I can
Mm.
thank my father for that. And then my passion for travel, especially within Europe and going to stone quarries. I love marbles. I probably lose my marbles over marble, but every project that I'm involved in, I think there's that kind of hero material that has that sort of, it's unique, it's of the earth, kind of tells a story in itself. And I think that that's something that we always lead our clients towards, really bringing that sort of natural materiality to a space.
Do you ever go into a place and you look around
Oh,
and you like,
yeah.
say, if you go into, I mean, I shudder to think if you were to come to my house, we're in the midst of redesigning spaces, but are you that kind of person? You look around and say, oh, that's interesting. I wonder why they did that.
I'm 150% that person. I went to dinner with my partner last night, and the whole time he was like, why aren't you looking at me? Because I was looking around the restaurant. I was looking at the cutlery. I was looking at the edge detail on the table. Yeah, it's it's definitely a habit. We've been on holidays. I'm like, oh, I really love that sugar container, and look at the underside to find out what the brand is. So
Yeah.
it's a
I
bad
guess it just totally makes sense based on, what you grew up around and
yeah.
your dad and your mom and grandmother. It's that real appreciation for everything around you.
Yeah.
Is that something, do you think that is inherent, or is it something that can be taught?
Um, it's a good question. I think it's inherent. I think it's not until you may be a little bit older that you associate these things and you realize that you have those sort of qualities. When I was younger, I was always told, oh, you have a photographic memory. As I
Mm.
said, when I was 9 years old, my family were building the family home, and I'd come with them to see materials and go look at kitchens, for example. And then my mum would ask me afterwards, oh, do you remember what the color of the stone was on that? Because I can't remember. And I'd be able to answer her because I would absorb my surroundings and be able to visualize them. And I think that that now comes through as an adult, that when I go
Mm.
somewhere, I am looking around because it's like I'm taking visual, like sort of mental photographs of the space to use at a later date and
It's
kind of,
such a great skill to have though too,
yeah.
isn't it? Is it important for a designer to have a certain style or aesthetic, or to be known for a certain style or aesthetic?
I think the skill of a designer is being able to fulfill a brief
Mm.
and understand and extract the client's needs and wants. And obviously, there's always going to be a filter of your own aesthetic and your own opinion. But I think that there needs to be an understanding of what the goal is, and then
Mm.
what you can bring in your own aesthetic to fulfill that and to create something that is unique in itself. I mean, I definitely have my own aesthetic. As we said, I love natural timbers and patterned marble floors, and that always creeps in, but it's always, in my opinion, still relevant to that initial brief that you get, or, part of that story that you build, and the rationalization of why things are the way they are within a space is part of that overarching story.
Was it a given that this was what you were going to be doing for a living based on what you grew up around? Was it ever a question that it wasn't going to be that?
It was never a question for me. Once I'd worked out that that's what it was, I mean, sure, there's been a little bit of variation along the way from, as I said, I completed a master's in architecture. I worked as an architect in Australia and then came to the UK and was like, yeah, I like architecture, but I'm kind of more excited by sort of small scale detail and
Yeah.
sort of that human experience. But I don't think I'm very fortunate that that path was never set out for me. It was set out by me.
That's such an important distinction, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
What was that path like to WATG and Wimberley Interiors? What was that path like? If you could describe it for me.
Initially, it was a very straight line. As I was studying, I knew kind of what that goal was. I knew how long it took me, or it would take me, to complete my degrees and where I would study. As I was studying, I was also working at an architectural practice in Sydney. And that was all very much a straight line. But while I was at that architectural practice, which is kind of a similar disciplines or variety of disciplines as WATG, I got the opportunity to be involved in master planning and interior design and a little bit of landscaping. So I got to see a kind of world of design. And then I came to London with the expectation that I would continue in architecture. I had a few friends who lived here. There were roles where they were going, where they were currently working. And so I interviewed and thought, yeah, I'll test the waters here and I'll bring my architect hat to the table. But I quickly learnt that I was on the other side of the world. And what I thought I knew was kind of not what I knew.
Mm.
And very quickly, I learned that I was kind of out of my comfort zone, but also that I needed to push myself. And then I joined WATG again, actually thinking, oh, I was going to continue on with architecture and maybe interior design wasn't right for me. But as soon as I joined WATG in Wembley, it really made me realize, no, you're on the right track and stick with it. And yeah, it's been 7.5 years now. And I love what I do.
How confident does one need to be to actually move forward towards that passion of yours, to know that, yeah, this is exactly what I need to be doing?
I think the confidence in terms of growing one's career and following their passions, I think this is something that you learn along the way. You learn that about yourself. I was confident that I was going to be an architect and work as a proper capital A architect, but that hasn't happened, and I'm happy for that. I think that yeah, I followed the right path and I kind of listened to my instinct rather than just kind of confidently ran forward.
When you look around an entertainment space or hospitality space, what does a space done right look like for you? What are all the elements that are flowing feel like for you?
I think that as a guest in those spaces, there's a sense of comfort, and comfort comes from the proportions and scale of a space, where you may be seated, what the materials are around you, how close or far apart the furniture might be. All of those sorts of things, that human experience is really important. But then also, how animated is that space?
Mm.
Is it a really kind of uncomfortable dining room where everyone's silent and too, you know, awkward to make a sound, or is there sort of animation and visual interaction that kind of elevates the space?
It's an interesting evolution, isn't it, in the design space? Because there was a time, what was it, maybe the early 90s, where that kind of stark,
Mhm.
quiet space or restaurant would be considered, oh, that's what elegance is.
Yeah,
That's what
minimalism.
luxury is.
Yeah,
But that's not the way it is now, isn't it? Is it maybe it's a sense that we're getting more comfortable with ourselves and we're getting more in touch with what it is we want as opposed to the physical and material trappings that define luxury for us. Is that how you would see it?
absolutely. I think that comfort and almost familiarity, like it's aspirational, but it's still sort of familiar. I think that that's what draws people to a space.
Mm,
And you see that, as you say, in the sort of 90s, early 2000s, that style of sort of very stark architecturally designed hospitality spaces, particularly in London, are going through this sort of softening
yes.
and human touch now, which is really sort of evident in the last sort of 10 years that I've been in London.
What about colors? Is there a color that you gravitate towards that you see as something that really amalgamates everything that you feel is about comfort and connection?
I don't know if I'm drawn to a particular color. It's funny, as we go through different projects, in my mind, I'm like, oh, I don't want to use that color because I feel like it's too reminiscent of something we've done before. I think that all colors have, um, again, if you have a story, there's a thought process behind it. We're currently working on a space where the entire private dining room is red lacquer and a bold carpet. And my instinct normally would be, oh, I don't know about red. It's a bit too harsh. But it's really coming together so beautifully that it's almost challenging my own perception. Like, oh, I never would have thought that would have worked, but it's looking incredible. And I think that if there's a relevance to the space, to the cuisine, to the story, to the location, I don't think there's a particular color that really is more important than or more suitable than another.
What do you think are your strengths?
Usually talking.
It's a good
um,
strength.
yeah. I think whether it's the strength, I'm passionate, and I think that my passion has helped to really help me understand who I am,
Mm.
to help me guide me through my career and know what it is that I want, what my goals are, and it's yeah, passion has really benefited me and helped me.
What were you like as a kid?
um,
I love that
Probably,
laugh.
yeah. Well, I was only recently back home in Australia, and my mum presented me with a lifetime's supply of school reports
Oh dear.
from the age of 5 to 18, and yeah, common themes definitely over my school life. Damien should talk less and focus more. Damien is entertaining, needs to focus. It's the adult that I am and the child that I was.
Yeah. I was told on all my school reports, she's lovely, but she's a bit of a chatterbox.
Yeah, same. We have something in common.
And we both made a living
Yeah,
out of doing
exactly.
that, which is an interesting
Telling
insight, don't you
stories.
think? What kind of toys did you play with when you were a kid? What were your hobbies?
Lego exclusively. That was my escape,
Mm,
building so many things. And then I started to, I think probably by the age of 6 or 7, it was
mm,
about Lego towns, Lego houses, little villages. My dad, the carpenter, built a sort of large box, timber box that I could permanently set up my Lego town in and not have to pack it away at the end of the day and be able to sort of tuck that and work on it like a project. But yeah, I still have all of my childhood Lego tucked away safely in a large box in Sydney.
Oh, I love it. Your family sounds amazing.
Yeah,
They sound like a
they're
very
amazing.
nurturing group,
Yeah,
and safe space for you to explore who and what you wanna be.
yeah, definitely,
What
definitely.
do you gravitate towards for fun today?
Travel. My fun is like, again, just exploring. I feel that there's no corner of the world that I don't want to explore. And whether work takes me there or my own sort of downtime. If I have any downtime in London at home, my mind automatically goes, oh, where's my next holiday? And I think a lot of people will also echo that and say, yes, Damien's always on holidays and traveling. It's something I just learning about different cultures and
What do you get
people
out
and
of it?
places. I just think it's again, it's part of that kind of like photographic sort of
Mm,
bank of memories. It's just understanding. It's almost like falling into a Google trap or where you want to start reading something and you keep reading more and more and more. Travel does that for me. Going to a place and start seeing like, oh, what's the food like in this region, or what do people do, or why is something the way it
mm.
is in this location. I don't know, just really kind of I absorb it.
Are you
Really
searching for something? Going towards something?
good question. I don't know. Perhaps I am. I feel like we're here for only a certain period of time, and there's so much to explore. There's so much to see. Why not take that opportunity when you can and find out and get that knowledge?
What do you still want to achieve?
Hmm. Personally, my goal personally would be to have a studio that I manage, run, and kind of
Mm,
leading within the WATG umbrella or of my own. I want to impart my knowledge or experience, but also I love to hear what the team's experience is.
mm.
Again, what don't I know? Tell me more. What have you seen that I haven't seen? Where have you been? Why did you go there? Why? What? I think that that's really important.
Mm.
I don't know, maybe find where in the world I will ultimately end up. Maybe that's part of it. That kind of desire to travel to see maybe where's next. There's nowhere at the moment or no thought in my mind of, oh, it's time to leave London.
Mm.
I love London. It was never a question to come to London. It was always, again, part of that plan. But yeah, there is now a part in my mind of, is there a next, and where would that be, or why would that be?
For so many of us, there's always the search for a sense of belonging, even if we did have a very strong foundation of that when we were kids. As we grow, it's I think it's natural, it's human nature to spread your wings and to see where life takes you, right?
Yeah,
And to
absolutely.
see ultimately where you want to put down roots, if that is something that you want to do. But it's that search of, where do I belong? The version of myself now as an adult, where is that community for me? Right.
Yeah.
And
I feel
it's,
like, I mean, absolutely. When I first moved to London, I think that there was challenges. You taking yourself out of something you've always known and moved
mm,
to a new place. And at the time, you think, oh, this is more difficult than I thought it would be. It's exhilarating, really. I mean, that whole moving to another world and really trying to find who you are, and that
yeah.
maybe that is something. I mean, I know I'll probably end up as an old man in Sicily eating pasta every day. Maybe I'm searching to try and avoid what I know is
That's
obvious.
not a bad thing to happen,
It's
at the
not a
end of the
bad thing
day.
at all, not at all.
Sicily's absolutely beautiful,
Yeah,
right? And
absolutely.
healthy, and
Yeah.
all the
Sunny and
food, and
gorgeous.
yes. I mean, at the end of the day, isn't that what we all dream of in retirement?
Yeah, yeah.
Right?
So I know that that's inevitable.
What do you want people to know about you, or what don't people know about you that you think they should?
I think, as an observation of myself, one of the things that I've always noticed is, what you see is what you get.
Mm.
There's no daytime Damien and then home time Damien. It's just one. And it's not in an abrasive way of like it or lump it. It's, here I am. I wear my heart on my sleeve. And yeah, I'm very, very vocal and with my opinion. Yeah, I think that, and I think that that's what perhaps people, well, I'd like to think that's what people are drawn to,
Mhm.
is the honesty of who I
Yeah.
am and the familiarity, and that I'm approachable. You can have a conversation with me. We can laugh. We can also be really professional. Yeah, what you see is what you get.
Authenticity. Yeah.
Authenticity. The word that
Yeah.
I always use that I didn't use now.
That's what I'm
Absolutely.
here for.
Yeah.
Okay, what I'm gonna do now, as we hear the papers rustling, I'm gonna ask you some quick fire questions,
Okay.
okay? It's the same questions I'm asking everybody, so
Okay.
it's fun. Or not. I'm just kidding. Um, Tell me about some of the jobs you've had in the past. Doesn't have to be, what you're doing now related.
Really boring, actually. Retail. I worked in menswear for 5 years, and the local department store,
Hmm,
and then design.
okay. What did you grow up believing?
I grew up believing I was probably not going to have the opportunity to leave Sydney, and I would be in Sydney forever.
What were you taught was fundamental to a fulfilling life?
Respect. Respect and honesty.
What's your beverage of choice?
Aperol spritz.
Favorite meal?
Mum's lasagna.
Mm. We've talked a lot about travel. Is there a place that you still really want to go to but haven't had a chance?
Loads. Lots of places. South America.
Mm.
I've not seen any of South America, and I'm desperate to get there.
If you could ask God, the universe, any entity that you believe in, one question, what would it be?
Why aren't I taller?
You're perfect just the way you are.
Oh, great. Thank you.
What was the dumbest dare you ever agreed to?
Oh, wow. See, I must be risk adverse in my old age because I have to try and think back to when I was a lot younger and I would do these things. Probably jumping off rocks in the bush as a child, but only to discover those rocks were cliffs.
Okay.
And it was a lot further to fall than I had thought it would be.
Weren't mentally prepared for that one, were you?
Yeah, and now as an adult, I think I would never do that. Why did I do that?
The folly of youth, as they
Yeah,
often
exactly.
say. Texting or talking?
Absolutely talking.
Fiction or nonfiction?
Non-fiction.
What was the last book you read? Nonfiction.
Mariah Carey's memoirs.
Is it good?
It's actually really good.
Really?
Yeah.
I'll have to pick that one up.
Yeah. No, maybe. Well, it is a New York Times bestseller.
Yeah. So. She's brilliant. Are you kidding?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you don't get to be who she is without being extremely intelligent.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right?
And driven.
Really and driven. And finally, if you had a superpower, what would it be?
Ooh, that's a good one. If I had a superpower, probably time travel. Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, that is absolutely what I would do. Time travel, go back in time. Again, that thirst for knowledge. I want to go back, understand why something is the way it is. Yeah. Amazing. Absorbed it. And then I'd come back.
Any particular age, century, decade?
Probably the 60s, actually. There's just something about the 60s that 60s and 70s. I just think, oh, yeah, I'd love to have been part of that.
Damien, this has been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you
so much for your time.
No, this has been great. Thank you. It's been amazing.
That was Damien Follone, Senior Designer at Wimberley Interiors, joining me from London. You've been listening to The Drawing Board, a WATG podcast. I'm Onita Rajpal. Until next time, thank you for joining us.